Five, four, three, two, and one. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Make the Jump here from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network. And of course, you know, you've heard some fantastic guests across the last couple months. We've been a little bit of a siesta for a little bit because there's been interesting pockets of Star Wars news and stuff, but we never slack when it comes to having guests on. Of course, sitting across from me on this episode of Make the Jump, I don't even know when the last time I had this guy on Make the Jump. Maybe we were talking about some Sith Lords at the time, but it's Mr. James Brown himself. James, how are you this evening, my friend?
I'm good, man. How you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic. And of course, all the way at Georgetown University is our good friend, Dr. Patrick Johnson, the author of The Physics of Star Wars. Patrick, how's it going this evening?
It's going quite well. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yeah, we're super excited to break it down. James, I know that listen, you came to me first and you said, yeah, dude, there's this guy who wrote this book about physics and it's connected to Star Wars, and I think we need to have him on. And James, you told me this, and I was like, go ahead. It's like, tell us how this all happened, because I'm super excited about this.
I got to go back a little bit here, and I realize sometimes I get long-winded, and that's kind of one of my many charms. But I've always had a love of physics, and one of my biggest issues with the Force Awakens, or sorry, The Last Jedi, when we went to the theater and we came out, and I was like superbly angry afterwards, feeling like I've been gypped and everything, was the faster than light collision between two large masses coming, and one of them's moving at near light speed and one of them's stationary. And I had an issue with the fact that the energy released from an explosion of that size, or an impact of that magnitude at that speed, would quite literally obliterate every notwithstanding the planet that they had just landed on as well. And that goes back to you know theory of general and spatial relativity, and I had this huge issue with that. And after a while, I was like, oh, it's just, it's Star Wars, and it's, nothing ever really makes sense. So my girlfriend, who's a fantastic human being, as Patrick pointed out in an email between us, came home with The Physics of Star Wars one day, and she hands it to me, and she just smiles. And I'm just like, well, my life is complete now. So I began reading it, and within the first few pages, I was hooked. I was into it. And as I stated earlier, when we were off the air, I fully admit that I have not had a chance to finish the book yet. Work schedule. However, I'm about halfway through, and there's this nice little stack of points inside the book that I was like, oh man, we got to talk about this. And if you look at it, it's actually literally like every other page. So I'm going to ignore those because that's going to take way too long to go over. But the point that I'm getting at is that it's a fantastically well-written book. It's funny. It puts physics into a term that even the stoutest of millennial yeomen can understand, and it is very interesting as well. And it puts things in a universe that doesn't entirely make sense into a light of focus that maybe this actually kind of makes sense in a weird way. And there are three specific points I do want to touch on out of the book that we will get to. So far, when I've been going over it, and I am not a professor in physics as you are, I have yet to find a single issue with the math or with the concepts applied to the situations in the book. And I'm actually really, really, really enjoying this, and I really can't get over how much I'm actually enjoying reading this book. And I guess I'd first like to ask, what really inspired you to write this book? I've read the intro and everything, but I'd like to hear in your words, what inspired you to write this book?
So it's kind of an interesting story, I think, because I'm pretty new in my career. I don't see myself as like a super prestigious professor yet. Like I hope someday to be a more important person in my field, but I never would have thought that now would be a good time to write a book. I'm still establishing myself, etc. But I agreed to do some videos for Georgetown where they wanted to do some videos where professors from different departments would talk about how their field interfaces with Star Wars. And so there was like the political science of Star Wars, and I did some on the physics of Star Wars. And so I did these, and then a representative at Adams Media contacted me after seeing the video saying, we would like you to write this book. And like, this is basically taking two of the things that I love more than anything else in this world and putting them together, Star Wars and physics. And like, I mean, I grew up watching Star Wars. My dad showed me the movies when I was videos. Here I am dating myself again. But showed me the movies when I was young, and like, I absolutely loved them. Have watched them like repeatedly since. Was at opening night for several of them since I was old enough to do that kind of thing. And so they contacted me to write this book. I immediately forwarded the email to my family saying, this has to be a scam, right? Like, there's no way anybody's contacting me to write this book. But then it wasn't a scam, and here I am, an author of a book. Like, it was like just a kind of perfect coincidence of things coming together perfectly.
Well, I just have to say that's super, super exciting. I mean, even just to go to your family, Patrick, and to say like, this is a reality right now. Like, yeah. I'm about to write a book about the physics, something that I practice and something that I study and something that I'm passionate about,
yeah,
in cooperation with another passion of yours,
yeah,
the love of yours. I mean, that opportunity alone, when you look at it, and from what you're saying here, I mean, it's truly a dream scenario, is it not?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Like, I mean, I had thought about writing books. Like, I've thought about writing an intro physics textbook, which probably doesn't interest anybody listening to this podcast. But like,
oh, nonsense.
But like, I thought about doing that. I thought about writing books like the physics of Star Wars already. But like, I don't know. Like, I guess I always thought of that as something I would do somewhere in the amorphous future, rather than like actually getting around to doing it right now. And here I am. I got the opportunity, and I just said yes and went with it. And sure, it was a grueling schedule for, I don't know, 4 months or whatever it took for me to do most of the writing, but like, got it done, and here it is.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned in the phone call that you and I had the other day was that the person who was actually correcting, proofreading, and giving you, Star Wars knowledge was the person you thank at the beginning of the book, your partner, correct?
Yes, she did a lot of reading over it, and she took a lot of my completely nonsensical, poorly written sentences, turned them into very well-written sentences, and also several times pointed out like, no, you got this so wrong. Like, General Grievous is not a human. How dare you suggest such a thing? And like, when I was writing it, it's just like, oh yeah, he has organs. So like, yeah, he has human organs. And like, no. And so she definitely kept me humble and kept me in line.
That is excellent. It's always good to have a partner like that going into writing something. That combines the real world and the fantasy world and tries to make sense of the fantasy world.
Yeah.
That actually brings us on to the first point in the book that I would like to touch on.
Okay.
And it combines one of my favorite physics concepts with one of my absolute favorite statistical concepts. And it's the biodiversity in the galaxy. And it explains in this chapter how when you walk into the Mos Eisley Cantina, you see like 100 different alien species, everything from Tals to Grand to a friggin' Wookiee, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
And there's a group of Bith over in the corner just noodling away. And it combines the Drake equation, which is, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's the equation that shows the probability of any other alien race with sufficient technology attempting to contact us and the likelihood of us contacting them, which also relates to my favorite statistical concept of all time, the Fermi paradox, which is also known as switchboard theory. And Robin, are you familiar with the Fermi paradox at all?
No, I'm currently not. I'm just commenting
on
some science knowledge that I get. That's all I get.
Well, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong here. The Fermi paradox states that I've heard it referred to as switchboard theory before. There can be one one intelligent race on one side of the galaxy and one on the other, but the interstellar distance in between the two of them is too great for them to be able to possibly, communicate within the lifetime of that species. And given what's that?
Yeah. No, you're great so far.
And given in the in that span of distance, in that span of time, there may be one over here that's like a light bulb going on, but another one over here that's like a light bulb that's off. And when this light bulb goes on, this light bulb is now burned out. And once you have two races that are in the same area of the galaxy with the same level of technology, there's now this gap of time that's separating them, which is what a lot of the conspiracy theorists out there theorize happened with Mars, because, the universe has been around for almost 14 billion years at this point. And Mars has been around for a considerable amount of time. And I'm going to use an analogy that Neil deGrasse Tyson used on Cosmos, where if you took the entire history of the universe and come to a calendar year, the last minute of the last day at December 31st before midnight, if midnight is now, is where the human race as we know it exists. And the human race as we know it occupies time and makes a significant impact. So you still have an entire cosmological calendar year before that where there could have been any number of rise and fall of civilizations. And the Drake equation brings into that the question of star density, which if you have, and I think you said something like the Milky Way galaxy has about 100 billion stars, or give or take in it, and
a whole lot.
Star Wars galaxy, what's that?
A whole lot of stars.
A whole fucking lot of stars. And the Star Wars galaxy, in order to have this many species in this area of the galaxy all at once communicating with each other, would have to have upwards of 1 trillion stars, which is, it's over 1,000 times more stars than the Milky Way would have. And that being the absolute, beyond, the gravitational pull of stars and everything, which I was hooked on that first chapter there. And I get into the second chapter, biodiversity in the galaxy. I'm like, all right, this makes sense now. And I'm really hooked. And that was really just what grabbed my attention. And I guess going on from there, you mentioned General Grievous as well.
Yes.
And you go into, explosive decompression and how fast it would cause for the air to rush out of the ship, and the fact that, air is actually rushing from other parts of the ship at the same time. So they could have actually survived that.
Yeah.
And, General Grievous was only outside. He was outside for a survivably long time in zero gravity.
Yeah.
The amount of thought that you put into this, and for you to say a few minutes ago that you did this in 4 months.
It was about 3.5, I think. Started in December. Wow. Submitted my first draft was like early March is when I submitted the first draft. So admittedly, there was editing that happened after that, but the bulk of the writing was in the months of December, January, February, and then a couple weeks in March.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, that's actually that. Even I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up, Patrick, because the entire time I'm hearing you and James talk about this, I'm sitting back and I'm like, oh, Patrick must have been cringing so bad at that scene in Revenge of the Sith when that happened. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Well, so
which one?
That the evacuation of the Invisible Hands Bridge. Yeah. I definitely watching that. I would have been like. Pfft. Yeah, obviously
where I have my next mark, by the way, is evacuation of the Invisible Hand.
Yeah, and so I definitely thought oh, there's no way this is just movie magic kind of thing. And honestly, watching Star Wars, a lot of it is just movie magic. And I mean, I fully acknowledge there's magic brain powers in Star Wars. That doesn't mean that they exist in the real world. But I always wanted to start with a standpoint of let's assume that this is exactly the honest truth of what happened. How can I use physics to justify what is shown on screen? And it turned out with the evacuation of the Invisible Hand, I started digging deeper and I was like, wait a second. No, actually, this probably would have been not that far off. They might not have, when they're holding on to the equipment to not get sucked out, they might not have been as horizontal as it showed them, but they'd probably be something similar to that. And General Grievous would have been able to survive outside in zero G because like when you think of in movies, like a human is thrown out into outer space, Leia, perhaps what will start to happen is your body will start losing heat, but predominantly you lose the heat through evaporative cooling. So like the water that makes up 60% of your body or whatever the percentage is, like when it doesn't have air pressure holding it in, will just start evaporating. And evaporating is a cooling process. That's like how sweating works. And so like essentially you sweat yourself into becoming an ice cube. But Grievous like has internal organs contained in a pressurized sac.
Right.
And so since it like all of his biological parts are contained in a pressurized sac, he actually wouldn't have to worry about that so much. Like there probably would be a little bit of evaporative cooling, but not really that much. And then the next biggest effect is radiative cooling. So like you're constantly giving off infrared radiation because you have a body temperature. And that actually takes much, much longer for you to freeze into an ice cube. And so the 15 seconds that he's in 0G like vacuum, like he'd be totally fine. Like maybe come in a bit chilled kind of thing and then keep going about his evil ways.
Patrick, are you saying that the Mary Poppins Leia scene is not physically possible? Is that what you're saying to Ryan Johnson?
Oh well,
don't mean to put you on the spot.
I have thought about this. Admittedly, I have not written this in my book at any point because my book came out before the movie. But if I take the spirit that I had when writing my book and saying like this definitely happened as shown, how can I now use physics to justify this? There are ways that I can do that. So probably the simplest way is that Leia is shot out into space and she uses like her force powers to hold a pocket of air around her to create that air pressure she needs to prevent evaporative cooling. Yeah. And then she then uses her force powers to now you may it may be depicted as she is flying through space to get back, very much Mary Poppins style, but she could be using a force pull to pull the ship towards her. And like in space, from a relative standpoint, you can't really tell whether she is moving there or it's moving towards her. And so then she can do that. And then once she's back in the ship, they take her in and get her back into a pressurized area. She'll be able to recover from there. I'm going to say I don't want to throw shade at Ryan Johnson. I don't know if he necessarily thought through all of those details. Right. He might have another explanation as just it's a dramatic moment in a movie. But I could come up with ways to justify it as talked about there. There could be other explanations as well, but typically in my book, I just choose the one that I think makes the most sense. And certainly after seeing The Last Jedi, that was a thing where I was like, wait a second, how can I make this work? And I sat down, thought about it, talked it through with some friends, and that was the best we could come up with.
Hey James, can we get Patrick to write a book, because it's not even Leia I'm concerned about anymore. I'm more concerned about Akbar, because that man can hold in some oxygen out in space, and now suddenly he's out of the Star Wars universe.
I'm going to throw some biology at you here right now.
Okay.
And say that Moncals are an amphibious species. So he's going to have that layer of mucus around him. Yeah. That layer of mucus is not going to do anything in space. That layer of mucus is going to boil off or evaporate off just as quickly as the rest of it. And the fact that his body can't retain moisture at that, he's going to last even a shorter time in 0G than a human is.
Listen, I just need Patrick to write a book. Listen, I don't let's get away from the mucus and everything, but I just need him to write a book about why can Akbar survive in space by Dr. Johnson. I think that'd be a great novel. I think it would be absolutely fantastic.
But judging by his facial expressions, he probably agrees with my assessment of that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, James.
No, sorry about that.
But definitely. I think you're setting me up for something there where I just won't be able to justify what's shown on screen.
That's fine.
Chill, Robin.
I know. I just want to have a little fun with that. That's all.
Yeah. So, going on, that, ladies and gentlemen, that whole section of the book is page 34. This book, not including glossary of terms, is 232 pages of Star Wars plus physics awesomeness. And I'd like to step on and say this is not just a physics book. You actually have and economics portion of it, where you discuss trash disposal in outer space in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And that, when I got to that, when I started reading through that chapter, I was sitting at my desk at work, leafing through this book in a dead spell, and I hit that spot, and I just started laughing. And I had a guest walking past the desk who was just like, "What is so funny?" So I explained it to the guest too, and this particular guest that I have, I can't reveal names and obviously anything like that.
No, that's fine.
They are also a big fan of physics and a big fan of the sciences and a big fan of Star Wars. And I discussed the book with them earlier. That actually gone out and bought a copy and had started reading it. So we were discussing this during their hotel stay, and they said that they had the exact same reaction when they got to that spot. And Robin, just to give you an overview on this, there's giant trash planets floating in the Star Wars universe that are, outside of shipping lanes and everything, and they're not planets that have had trash dumped on them. Like, if you read through the history of Coruscant is an entire landfill on the lower levels. The lower 5 levels of the 5,000 some odd, they got filled with trash, because people just tend to chuck stuff down those big holes, go all the way down. But other places in the galaxy, the most reasonable explanation that I've seen so far is from this book, because you see that Star Destroyers just drop trash in the middle of space and everything. They don't really have an efficient way of disposing of it. So you got to assume that, like the Pacific trash vortex and everything, there's areas of space where trash is just kind of, come together over thousands of years, and you probably have entire landfill planets. And an interesting thought that I had while we're thinking about that is, some of these things could start retaining atmosphere, whether it's breathable or not, who knows? But they're going to have their own gravitational pull. Maybe there's denizens of these trash balls in space who don't know they're just trash balls and think they're trash on a planet. It's not an actual landfill planet. It's literally a planet landfill. It's great. And I'm actually kind of curious as to what led you to think about the trash in the Star Wars universe and write that chapter.
Yeah. So, like when I was coming up with ideas for the book, like it was a great excuse to go back and rewatch all the movies again. And like, I really wanted to try to, one, feature topics from as many different movies as possible, but two, like, not just like the things that you would expect from a physics of Star Wars book. And like just watching the scene where the Millennium Falcon like disguises itself in the released trash, I was thinking to myself, like, well, they say it's like standard protocol to release your trash before hopping to light speed. And I was like, well, what would be the consequences of that? Because like, I imagine there's common like transport lanes, like where you're following like the same path. You go to the same place in space and then hop to light speed because there's just like easier, like, I don't know, like your fewer obstacles you have to worry about, which different story about like whether when you're in hyperspace, you actually do have to worry about obstacles or not. But like, what would happen if you just kept dumping your trash in the same locations in space? Because like, if you do that on a boat or on the highway, you'll just get trash on the side of the highway. But in space, like, it could float off. And if you just dumped enough in one place, it would gravitationally attract and be just like the formation of planets and stars at the beginning parts of our universe, where there's just a bunch of, in that case, particles like atoms or dust particles, just slowly gravitationally attracting to like become bigger and bigger balls until they turn into planets or stars or whatever. Here you're starting with bigger chunks of space trash, and then like they form together. And honestly, like, one of the things that I thought about, like, and when I first thought about this, I didn't know off the top of my head, like, is this accurate or not? But I was thinking like, well, wait a second. Growing up, I played the Nintendo 64 Shadows of the Empire game, and like there's a level on Ord Mantell where it's like a junkyard planet, it seemed like, and I thought, wait a second, wouldn't it be really cool if that was actually the lore of the planet, of like it was just a bunch of trash that got dumped in space and like formed into a planet, and does not appear like that is exactly the origin story of the planet, but like it is considered a junkyard planet, and so like the premise isn't that far off of like a possibility to actually be in the canon of Star Wars. And so I thought that would be really interesting to talk about.
That is an awesome theory right there.
Yeah. And
another
also,
theory.
yes. Sorry,
no, go for it.
I was going to say, and also like like in the book, I always try to like talk about like, here's what's going on in the Star Wars universe and like how we can justify what we see. But then there's always a like a companion section where I talk about this is what's going on in our real world, or like how close are we to this technology, or these kinds of things. And so I don't know if you've gotten this far, but like talking about communicating with droids and stuff, like how do we communicate with our computers, and like looking at how we currently communicate, and like looking at artificial intelligence and where it's currently at. And with something like the trash, as you mentioned, the Pacific trash gyre, never know how to say that word, but like that is a real issue on our planet that like I don't think my book is going to bring the necessary attention to it that like will lead to the cleaning up of all the plastics, but like just being able to talk about issues that we have going on in our planet that are relevant to what I'm discussing in the Star Wars universe, I think is important. And so I try to throw in useful tidbits about things in our own universe here and there.
Absolutely. And that's not something that I thought about while I was reading it, but that's an excellent way to bring attention to something that is definitely a massive problem.
Yeah.
The other theory that I wanted to jump onto here is one that has bugged me since the beginning of Star Wars, and one that I actually thought about the way you represent it in the book a few times over my high school and military career when I was sitting in the middle of Afghanistan and really didn't have much else to do. Luke is described originally as being 20 years old, and Leia is 18 years old. We know that they're twins.
Yes.
And I always, when I was younger, thought of it as, an approximation of Luke's age. Like they rounded up to the nearest 10.
Yeah.
But theory of relativity.
Yes.
Something moves at close to light speed. It's not, it ages slower than something that's not.
Yeah.
And discounting your whole stellar rotational speeds, at the core of the galaxy versus the edge of the galaxy, stars rotating around the center of the galaxy faster they would at the outer arms, and the outer arms actually moving more quickly because they have to move linearly faster. And in that case, as said, there's sometimes being 50% more distance between any two given planets. I believe you used Naboo and was it Tatooine?
I assume it was Tatooine because like that's where Luke basically spent his entire life. Trying to. That is one of the things that like growing up before I ever pursued physics, like it was definitely something I thought about of like them being twins but different ages, and like before knowing physics, I was like, gosh, they got that one wrong, or like totally tried to retcon a thing. But like upon learning physics, it's like actually that's totally legit. Like that's what we call the twin paradox of like you and your twin can be exactly the same age. One of you goes off to space, turns around, comes back, and turns out they're younger than you now. And we have done experiments to verify this. And like one of the things that I think is most interesting associated with this is because like you may think like, okay, but all of the examples that we've ever tested, it's like an atomic clock gets shifted by 200 nanoseconds. And it's like, whoop-de-doo, why should we care about this? Why is this legit? But like going back historically, like observing the planets, like Mercury was always a little bit out of place from what Newton was predicting. And so like we were just like, oh, well, maybe like we're just missing something that's like a small thing. But it wasn't until Einstein proposed general relativity where it's like, oh, wait, his theory predicts exactly where Mercury should be perfectly. It's like, oh, well, that's a good sign. And then like when we established our GPS satellites, like it still wasn't fully like bought in that like general relativity was an important effect. And so they like programmed into the satellites, because maintenance of those is difficult once they're in space, like the correction for general and special relativity. And then they sent them off to space, but they had the general relativity part switched off. And then they're like looking at the predictions, and it's like, oh, you are standing exactly where you are. And it's like, good, this is working. But then after a day, it was wildly off, and then flipped on those general relativity corrections, and boom, GPS works exceptionally well now. And like, so without these general relativity, special relativity things, we wouldn't have GPS as we know it. Right. And then like going just from the canon of Star Wars, like I'm not going to say that necessarily George, I call him George because we're on first name basis, obviously. Yeah, but I'm not going to say that I feel 100% confident that he considered special relativity when deciding that, oh, Luke would be 20 and Leia would be 18, but twins, and this makes perfect sense. But like from an honest standpoint, they were both born at the same location, and pretty much immediately Luke was dumped on Tatooine and then didn't go anywhere, like pretty much. Whereas Leia, being a senator and a princess, is like zooming around the galaxy doing all kinds of things, and that's exactly what you'd need for her to end up being 2 years younger than Luke after 18 years, and so, or 20 years depending on which reference frame you're talking about. So yeah, like it turns out it could totally work out, with the one asterisk of relativity applies to our current universe as we know it, and whether hyperspace is something else, like that could affect the aging aspect of things. But I'm just willing to kind of stop at relativity can justify this.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that I really liked, was you had Luke stationary, Leia zipping around the galaxy at near light speed. And while at that point, the corrections are minor, if they're doing it for a long enough time, say 18, 20 years, it can definitely have an effect. And that really just buttered my egg roll. And I'm telling you, man, that was that made me happy as hell.
Yeah.
That is actually what I got up to in the book so far. Is I am at I just finished the when is Star Wars portion. Which is discussing if it essentially at the beginning of it, if it took place in our galaxy, when would it have to take place, or how long in the galaxy that it takes place in, what era of that galaxy is it taking place in. And I am actually really excited to finish this book, which as soon as I get off of here and finish recording Brick City Blockade live and come back from karaoke night tonight, I am going to plug through and finish the rest of the book, because I feel almost ashamed that I haven't done.
You should be ashamed.
Come on,
I'm extremely ashamed. I'm almost like Cersei Lannister walking through the streets of. So anyway,
I didn't bring my giant bell. I'm sorry. Gosh.
Shame. But I'm very ashamed of that. I've had the book for about a month, and my work schedule. I told you I work guest relations at the Hampton Inn, and it's been nutty. Bunch of gas fires down in Massachusetts and all that fun stuff. So,
well, if it makes you feel any better, like sure, while writing it, I obviously proofread it and everything. But since the book has come out, I've actually only listened to the audiobook. I haven't actually read the physical book cover to cover.
Who reads the audiobook?
Gosh, I should definitely remember his name. You're really putting me on the spot here. But he reads a number of the like actual Star Wars audiobooks. I can have you the name. I'm pretty sure it's John something or other. But
I don't actually care who it is, because I'd like you to redo the audiobook and I'll read it for you and I'll do it better.
Yeah, Jonathan Davis is his name. So,
Jonathan Davis. Yeah.
He's very good.
Yeah, no, he is very good. There are a couple points where I think something is lost in the audiobook, because like there'll be when talking about the like just vastness of space in one of the sections, I say like, oh, but like the Milky Way galaxy is only like 0.000 whatever, and like listening to Jonathan go like 0.000000001%. It's quite enjoyable and entertaining. So I feel bad for making them have to go through.
Yeah, you have to read it. You have to read it like Neil deGrasse Tyson's reading it.
Yeah.
I would actually honestly be very interested to know if he's read the book and what he thought of it. Given he is one of the most prevalent physics minds of our century.
Yeah.
So
please don't suggest such terrifying ideas. I mean,
it's terrifying for you. It's fascinating for me.
Yeah. Well, you can keep that thought to yourself then, because I'm gonna shut that out of my mind, because that's terrifying to think about. I mean, I would be very much honored and like would just stutter over.
It's fairly easy for me to email him real quick and say, "There's this book you gotta read."
James, we're not here to scare our guests.
Yeah.
No, we're not. I know we're not.
Yeah.
I think that it would be fascinating. Yeah. I'll shut up now.
Well, I every year, like, so this is not exactly Star Wars related, but like every year in my intro physics classes, I give about 7 exams throughout both semesters, and every year I write one exam that's themed surrounding Stephen Colbert, and I've done it for like the entirety of my professorial career, and like just somehow I think in my mind like one of these exams will end up in his hands one day, and he'll invite me onto his show, and then I'll get interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and that will be like the dream of a lifetime. But like obviously that is never going to happen, but like I just
nonsense.
Yeah. But if something like that were to happen with my book and Neil deGrasse Tyson, like I don't know how I would, like I don't know, I would just sit here and like be petrified for about 5 seconds, and then Neil would be like, all right, now it's your turn to talk, and I'd be like again, Neil, because we're on first name basis, obviously.
Of course.
Absolutely. I mean, as I cannot refer to him as Dr. Tyson, I have to refer to him as Neil deGrasse Tyson and use his full name. And I'm pretty sure if I actually had a conversation with the gentleman, I would use his full name at him constantly until he got irritated with it and told me to leave. So I can understand where it would be a terrifying and daunting thing and the equivalent for me would be if, what's his name? Seth MacFarlane came out and said, "Hey, I heard something that you did, and I think it's pretty great."
Yeah.
And then awkward silence, and then, what do I say? So,
yeah.
I feel you on that. I'll stop cracking bad jokes about him.
No, it's
although
totally...
I might actually email him.
All right. I mean, I won't stop you, but I will tell you that I will be horribly starstruck, and I have no idea what I would do.
That's usually the best kind of interaction.
Yeah. No, the few times honestly. I've met people borderline famous, like that is exactly how it's been. It's just like, hi, I just want to say I really like what you do, but I'm already interrupting your life, and so I'm going to turn around and walk away now. So
Harry Elwes remembered my name. I was ecstatic.
Wow. I went to I went to an event with a bunch of YouTube educators. Destin from Smarter Every Day and Henry from Minute Physics and CGP Grey and also Brady Heron of Number File periodic videos, like a billion channels kind of thing. And Derek from Veritasium. And like, I shook hands with all of them, but like about 6 months prior to that, just from some weird thing, don't ask, I had gone curling in Milwaukee with Destin from Smarter Every Day. And when I showed up at this event down in Huntsville, Alabama,
that's that weird Canadian sport with the
broom and the stones, yeah. And so when I showed up at the event, Destin was just like walking by, setting something up because he was the host of it, and like he stopped, looked at me, points, he's like, "Patrick?" And I was like, "Oh my god, he remembered my name." So yeah, that was like an amazing brush with greatness. And then like I really wanted to talk to the other people, and like I did, but I just made a huge fool of myself, and I made a huge fool of myself with Destin too. But like still, like he remembered my name, and that was pretty exciting. So that's like my closest brush with fame right there.
Well, the thing is, Patrick, too, let me just say this. You say that, you've brushed fame here, but did you brush the rock properly on the ice when you were curling? I mean, that's the true question.
Oh, gosh. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if you've tried curling, but it is very difficult. Like, I don't think of myself as especially fit, but I thought to myself, oh, I can sweep. Like, I can do that. And, like, we go up and down the ice once, and I am just dead. I cannot go any further. Like Destin was able to keep going. Other people I was with were like, this is no big deal. But like my just arms were just dead. And like I ride my bike every day. And so like maybe if I'd been sweeping with my legs, it would have worked better. But like no, just all of my upper body was just dead sore after that.
I can see that.
Absolutely. I mean,
I've never attempted curling before.
Well, you're missing out. It's a good time.
Most of the curling that I do involves weights and repetition, not so much brooms and ice.
All right. So well, you don't need to show off. It's okay.
Come on. Jeez,
no, not even in the slightest. There's out of the fact that I'm not very good at lifting weights either. I'm not an athletically inclined person, and I'm fairly certain that's my grandmother's side of the family. That I inherited the innate lack of him. That I'm good at hitting stuff, but that's about it.
We'll do it.
No, it's legitimately that's the only kind of sports I'm good at. But yeah, curling does not seem like something that I would have ever gotten into. So it's interesting to hear that's actually kind of athletically demanding, because it does not look like it.
It is exceptionally athletic demanding, and like just the difficulty of getting the correct speed and the rotation and like all of the dynamics that go into that are just very, very difficult to execute well, which like just as an interesting aside, like like the professional curlers are really good at what they do. And so the fact that they can control these things so precisely down to like centimeters across, like I forget how long the ice is, but it's like 50 meters long or something like that, is amazing that they can do this. And then on top of that, I find it especially interesting because the scientific community is currently split on actually why curling stones curl, because they behave differently than what you would expect. Like, so if you curl it clockwise from above, oh gosh, I'm putting myself on the spot here. It's going to curl with the direction of rotation, whereas everything else, like soccer balls, baseballs, everything else, curl against the direction of rotation. And if I got that backwards, I'm going to be very embarrassed. And so like there are two kind of rival groups doing research on this, and they have different theories and about like whether it's the way that like the stones are melting the ice a little bit, and that like water barrier kind of drags with it, and that affects the curling, or like whether it's these like kind of scrapes in the stones that show up and like kind of guide it along the way. And I just think it's super interesting that scientists don't actually have a definitive answer for how do you play this sport. But like there are people who like just have practiced it and learned it, where like they don't need to know the science. They're just like out there muscle memory doing what they need to do and making it work. Whereas scientists in their labs are like, well, I'm gonna try to figure out this stone, and the athletes are just like, no, we can do it. Don't worry about it.
We practice over beers. And
that's
stones, like
kind of high school in a nutshell right there.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of putting it, James. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, no, nerds over here being like, why did that do that? And the athletes just being like, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And they do it. They do it quite well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, Patrick, before we wrap up this episode of Make the Jump here, like we talked a little bit of Star Wars. We got some curling in there. Listen, that's what I love. Like you never know. I was talking to Patrick beforehand. I was like, listen, you never know where this conversation is going to go, which is absolutely great.
Right.
And James, I really appreciate like you really brought in the just overhearing you guys talk about like just all these different aspects of Star Wars and how they relate to different theories and just everything that you guys have explored yourself as well.
Don't get me wrong. I am no expert, and I do not have a doctorate in physics. It's more of a hobby for me.
Right.
So my knowledge pales in comparison to Patrick here.
Oh, that's always the best conversations too. Is the person who reads the book and goes through and spends some time on the side, just kind of breaking down everything, to actually have a conversation with somebody who's a professor of physics and somebody who has a passion for that and has also connected that to freaking Star Wars. I mean, that is unique. That is special. And Patrick, before we let you go, I never let anybody go. And James knows this. We never let anybody go on the network without asking them a single question. And that is, since you have written a book about the physics in Star Wars, all right? What is one character amongst all the Star Wars films that you gravitate towards? See, I'm trying to be funny. That you gravitate towards in the Star Wars universe as one of your favorites?
I guess it depends on which time in my life you're talking about. Like, because like when I was a very young child, I am not going to apologize for this, but like I loved the Ewoks. Like they were my favorite.
Nice.
I know that's not a popular opinion, but like, no, I absolutely loved like just watching them like take out ATSTs and like the stormtroopers. Like loved that scene. And so there was that. And then like in my teenage years, I think it goes without saying that Boba Fett became one of my favorites. Like I feel like that's just a stereotype at this point.
That'd be angst, man.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, like at this point, like I don't really know because like one, we're just starting to get to know like Rey and Kylo Ren, and like I think they could have interesting arcs to go. I like just from a movie introducing me to a character and drawing me in, like the opening scene of The Force Awakens with Rey, and it's like basically just like no talking or anything. She's just going about her life. Like that really brought me into her character in a way that like I didn't think a movie could do in such a short amount of time.
I can't stand Rey.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. You're wrong. But
hold on, Mr. Professor of Physics over there. Reasonable explanation for everything the way the universe works. We have another protagonist who is a teenager who inexplicably comes into Force powers. They are using the same plot device over again. I do not dislike Daisy Ridley. I do not dislike her portrayal of Rey. I think that with what she was given, she did a fantastic job. I don't find the character believable. I don't find her a necessary part of the universe. And I think the best thing they can do in the next movie is kill Rey off and let the First Order win.
Well, I don't want to get into the business of trying to write movies because, like, I feel like no matter what I suggest, it's not going to be satisfying to some demographic of the crowd because, like, I think no matter what they do, there's going to be a demographic that's upset about it. Like,
very good point.
If they do what you do, there's going to be lots of people upset about that. If they like have Daisy and Rey become like, I don't know, the next Luke, like who goes off and starts her own Jedi Academy, there will be people who are upset about that. If she and Kylo Ren get married and like run off to wherever and like just kind of start their own life and say screw the rest of the universe, people will be upset about that. Like I think it's impossible to please everybody, but like I agree with you that like a lot of the kind of like story beats of The Force Awakens were very A New Hope-y. But like I think that given the way that like the original movies made for an excellent trilogy, the prequels were prequels, and like just another not so popular opinion, like I think that the Phantom Menace is underappreciated, and I think it is unfairly maligned with the other two. Like,
don't worry, Robin, I'm not going to jump onto that one.
Save it for Jim.
It has its flaws. Like I'm not going to say whatever, but Duel of the Fates is like one of the greatest things that's ever been. So just deal with it if that's a problem.
I love that answer.
But I think to have a movie with like that's playing it safe, I think to say like, hey, look, this is back in good hands, and we can talk about The Last Jedi and some of its issues if you really want to. But like there are like I think the things that they did in The Force Awakens, I think really helped give me the faith in their ability to like kind of recapture the magic of the original trilogy, to keep me coming back to the next few movies, which if that's their goal, congratulations, they succeeded on that. What they do with it, like they can certainly lose me again. But yeah, so like if I had to choose a favorite character, like I coming back to your original question, like I wanted to give credit to Rey, but like overall, this might be kind of an absurd answer, but it has to be Chewbacca. Like,
nice.
I just feel like he's always like useful. Like he's there when he's needed. Like, like he doesn't actually like communicate anything that we can understand, but like the dynamic that he has with Han is amazing. Like growing up, I loved trying to make Chewbacca noises, and I can't say that I'm any good at them, but like I loved doing it. And like, I don't know, I too am
Solo yet?
What? Sorry, was that?
Have you seen Solo yet?
I have. And the idea that he had spent possibly years of his life feasting on human flesh in a cage somewhat terrifies me, but that seems to be the story they're proposing. Yes, but like, I don't know, like he like, especially like, I know like opinions on Solo have been mixed at best, but like one of the things that I appreciated was like, just the little bits of story about Chewbacca, and that like when they're trying to capture, like I'm not going to be able to remember all the words, but like capture the fuel to like bring it away, and like Han's like, no, go take care of your fellow Wookiees, and then he comes back and like helps out. Like I don't know, that seemed very true to Chewbacca there, and I appreciated that. And so like he would be my choice because he's super loyal, even when he doesn't get a medal at the end. It's like he's still there to help out.
That's a really great point.
That's a very good answer.
I mean, I feel like Chewbacca gets underappreciated sometimes, James. I think we all appreciate that answer here at the network.
Yeah.
I would also like to ask the question of, and it's just a generic Star Wars question I ask every Star Wars fan. What's your favorite Star Wars movie so far?
So, as I kind of alluded to before, like it probably has evolved over time. Like certainly the one that I feel like has the most value to me in my life is Return of the Jedi. Like I know that Empire Strikes Back is the answer that I'm supposed to give, but like I'm sorry, like just growing up, that's the movie that hit me the most. I thought, like, going back and rewatching it, I still think it's a well-made movie, and I still enjoy it quite a bit. But like kind of The Force Awakens, I feel like in my mind, I don't know how much of it is just recency, but also like just kind of recovering from Episode 3. Like it just was like when I walked out of there, I was like, oh yeah, that was like really good. I'll say going back and rewatching it, I'm like, okay, maybe I was a little bit kind of starstruck with like the opening scene, and then also just like having the bar set so low. Like, but I think that is up there. But like, I also think I don't want to pass a full judgment on any of the newest ones until I've seen the full arc of the episode 7, 8, 9, because I feel like how that plays out can retroactively go back and affect how I feel about the earlier ones. But Return of the Jedi is my personal favorite.
I can accept that answer gladly. As long as it's one of the original 3, I'm happy.
Yeah. Oh, did I say that? Sorry, I meant Revenge of the Sith. Like, yeah, no, just like everything about that was just so the dialogue.
Massive scale, biggest scale space battle you've ever seen. Yeah. Also, the greatest lightsaber duel, the greatest series. I'll accept that answer.
Yeah. Well, the greatest lightsaber duel is with Darth Maul and Phantom Menace. So.
That is the most gripping lightsaber duel. I think the best choreographed still has to go to Anakin and Obi-Wan and Mustafar.
Okay. Perhaps the choreography is better, but like, I don't know. I personally, like, as I alluded to before, Duel of the Fates, like that just kind of wins me over. Like you could have put that over, I don't know, like the scene of like, I killed them all. Like, and I probably would have liked that scene. So.
I'm going to disagree. I'm not going to disagree with you on that one at all.
He was about to disagree, and then he changed.
I was going to say I like the.
No, actually, I misspoke, Robin. Dick.
Oh my!
I think it's about hitting that time here, sir.
Oh, it is that time here at the Podcast Network on Make the Jump, and on every single podcast we do here at the Brick City Blockade. It's a little thing we like to call, James,
plug time.
It's plug time here at the Brick City Blockade. James, where can the good people find you across social media?
You can find me on Facebook at VoiceOverActing1212, on Twitter at I'm Not Really Him 9, and on Instagram at VoiceOverActing1212. You can also find me across the board Podcast Network, episodes of the Brick City Blockade Network, podcast, mostly doing the intros.
James, we lost a little bit of your plug time right there.
Would you lose me?
Probably right in the middle of it, as soon as after the Facebook piece. So if you want to do it
after Facebook, cool. So like everything. You also lost me at Facebook at VoiceOverActing1212, Twitter at I'm Not Really Him 9, and on Instagram at VoiceOverActing1212 as well. You can also find me on Holotable Hangouts and the Brick City Blockade Podcast Network, mostly doing intros, but occasionally offering opinions that nobody else agrees with.
I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think some people agree with you. You and Jim have a good chemistry when it comes to.
Yeah, very true. I also get really drunk and tell you that Ray's a terrible character and then stand up for when I'm sober. So.
Oh,
shame.
Shame.
No shame whatsoever. None whatsoever. I'm going to go out to karaoke tonight and I'm singing The Devil Went Down to Jamaica. I mean, what do you want?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to close out your little plug time there, Mr. James Brown. They know where to find you and they know what you're singing. Patrick.
Yep, Charlie's Tap House down in Hampton Beach. I'll be there until around about midnight.
Patrick, where can the good people find you and all your works?
I am much to the chagrin of my publisher. I'm not very present on social medias.
Okay.
I do have a Twitter account. It is at JOHNSOPG. It's the first 6 letters of my last name, first initial, middle initial. If you decide to follow me, you'll mostly be disappointed that I don't tweet that often. If you really want to find me there, you can. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on Georgetown Physics' website and contact me through that. Email is much better than phone calls, that would be how you get a hold of me. If you want to find my book, it's sold wherever books are sold, so your Amazons, your Barnes & Nobles, etc. Find it there. If I could just throw in a quick plug for buying it on Amazon, because Amazon provides a really nifty author ranking and book ranking, and so I can see how I rate versus all 8 million books on Amazon. And so I definitely don't obsessively check that every single day to see how I'm doing.
Like you just did. All. Where are you now?
Well, that's a good question. Earlier today, I was around 200,000, but let's see, currently numbered 252,749. Back in the day,
out of 8 million, that's good.
Yeah, on release day, I broke the top 5,000, so that was pretty exciting. I was somewhere around like 4,700th best book on Amazon, so I will forever have that. I have a screenshot of that day when I was like #1 in physics and astronomy textbooks, and I took a screenshot of being a little bit ahead of a Neil deGrasse Tyson book that came out like 10 years earlier. And so I was like, aha, take that, Neil. Wherever you want to find my book, it should be available. Also, feel free to support your local bookstores. I always love supporting local bookstores.
Absolutely. Make sure
this is the wonderful lady who bought your book for me.
What are you saying, James? I can't understand a word you're saying.
This is the wonderful lady who bought the book for me, by the way.
Hello.
Oh, there she is. I can see your hand.
Hello.
Hi.
Anyway, Robin, your turn.
Yes, please make sure to go out and pick up Patrick's book at your local booksellers. Support those local booksellers. It's so important. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's so many great local booksellers around this country right now that, shopping local businesses on small business Saturdays and small business Sundays. It's so important, and it's a great way to get your copy of the physics of Star Wars. I'm super excited to pick this thing up and really get in depth with it. So you guys can follow me over on Twitter at Mr. Vogt Tweets. Head on over, follow all my Star Wars tomfoolery and everything happening at the podcast at the official Vogt. Please make sure to check out www.brickcityblockade.com for everything happening in that galaxy far, far away and beyond. TeePublic, pick up one of our Brick City Blockade t-shirts to help support the network. Patreon, your monthly sponsorship, helps bring different people on, helps us bring epic content to you, the fans. And please make sure to check out our Starlight Donation Center over at salsalabs.starlight.org/Brick City Blockade Podcast Network page. You can make a donation. We've breached our 1,000. Let's get it up to 5,000 by Christmas time and bring more smiles to kids' faces. Patrick, it has been awesome having you here on Make the Jump. James and I cannot thank you enough.
I would like to say one more thing, by the way.
Yes.
And this is more plug for you, Patrick. Anybody who is considering buying the book, go and do it immediately. All joking and shenanigans aside, it is a fantastically well-written book. It's funny, it's informative, it throws the entire Star Wars universe into this new light. And the most important thing that it did for me is it gave a real depth and reality to the Star Wars universe. That's mine. It gave a real depth and reality to the Star Wars universe that wasn't there before. And I really think that you brought something special and unique and something that nobody else has ever done before, too far away, that we all know and love very well.
Well, thank you very much for your compliments and your plugs. Perhaps I'll take that quote and put that on the back of the next printing and say, said by James Brown, and really confuse the rest of the world.
That would be funny as hell.
Oh, that is.
If you do that, I want a copy of it.
Well, I think my publisher will have some say in that. But like, if it can be done, I'll see what I can do.
That would be excellent.
Oh, that is so great. Thank you guys so much for listening to Make the Jump here from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network. For Patrick and for James, this is Robin Vogt signing off. And as we always say here at the podcast network, stay cool and may the force be with you.
Always.